The gentle, almost melancholic patter of rain caressed the towering, obsidian glass panes of the Kumasi Grand Manor, a sound that seemed to amplify the chilling absence of warmth within its opulent walls. Here, luxury was abundant, yet genuine comfort was a forgotten currency, replaced by a profound, echoing stillness that settled in every corner. Mr. Kwame Mensah, a business magnate whose name was synonymous with success throughout the Republic of Songhai, lauded for his sprawling property conglomerate, found himself utterly solitary in his expansive, art-laden drawing room. Draped in a simple, unadorned kaftan that contrasted sharply with the room's grandeur, his gaze, usually commanding and sharp, was now distant, fixed upon a heavy, silver-framed photograph from his wedding ceremony decades ago. It depicted a younger, beaming version of himself beside a radiant Sophia, a stark contrast to the present. His countenance, once a powerful beacon of pride and unshakable authority, was now deeply etched with a bewildering mixture of sorrow and confusion. An insidious sense of unease, like a creeping vine, had taken root within him, tightening its grip with each passing day. By all external measures, he was the epitome of achievement. He possessed staggering wealth, enough to last generations. He had achieved national, even international prominence. He had a family, the cornerstone of any man's legacy. Yet, despite these apparent triumphs, why did an overwhelming sense of artificiality, of a meticulously crafted illusion, pervade his existence? His spouse, Sophia, the woman in the photograph, now offered smiles that seemed reserved only for the moments she was presented with new, glittering adornments, her affection apparently priced in carats and gold. His daughter, Aisha, a young woman indulged in every whim, addressed him with the formal title of father almost exclusively when requiring substantial funds for her glamorous overseas excursions and socialite lifestyle. His son, Chinedu, the heir apparent, remained mostly taciturn, a fortress of aloofness, speaking only if the topic directly concerned the intricate workings of the family enterprise, his words measured and devoid of filial warmth. But this particular evening, something delicate yet essential had fractured irrevocably within him. Kwame had just returned from the bustling, antiseptic corridors of the Accra General Infirmary. The attending physician, a man of considerable repute, had assured him of his perfect physical health, a clean bill that should have brought relief. However, during the routine examination, separated by nothing more than a thin curtain, he had inadvertently overheard a conversation that felt like a hammer blow, crushing his spirit into 1,000 pieces. In the echoing infirmary corridor, Sophia, believing herself to be alone, had been laughing, a light, carefree sound, into her expensive smartphone. She was blissfully unaware of his presence, just feet away, when she declared with chilling clarity to an unseen confidant, "If this old man perishes now, I swear my genuine, vibrant life will finally commence." His heart didn't just plummet, it felt as if it had been torn from his chest and thrown into an abyss. He stood immobilized, rooted to the spot, his limbs suddenly feeling frail and unresponsive, the doctor's reassurances about his health turning into a cruel mockery. The truth, a truth he had perhaps subconsciously avoided for years, now clamored to be uncovered. Later that night, as thunder rumbled ominously outside, mirroring the storm within his soul, Kwame summoned his most dependable driver and longtime confidant, Kofi, a man whose loyalty had been tested and proven over decades. "Kofi," he articulated slowly, each word heavy with unspoken pain, "I find myself in a desperate situation, and I require your most delicate and unconventional assistance. I need your help in staging my demise." Kofi's eyes, usually calm and knowing, widened in sheer disbelief, his composure momentarily shattered. "Sir? Forgive me, did I hear you correctly?" Kwame leaned in closer, his voice a low, conspiratorial whisper. "Yes, Kofi. I wish to discover the true, unvarnished nature of my family. I must know if they will genuinely mourn me, or if they will secretly rejoice when I am no longer here to burden them." Kofi, a man of simple wisdom, scratched his graying head, his brow furrowed in deep concern. "My chief," he began, his voice laced with apprehension, "this is a weighty, perilous affair, with consequences we cannot fully foresee." "I am acutely aware of the gravity," Kwame conceded, his own voice quivering with a mixture of resolve and trepidation. "But I would prefer a simulated death, a glimpse into the raw truth, however painful, to an existence mired in falsehood and polite deception." The following morning, with a heavy heart but a determined spirit, Kwame paid a discreet visit to his personal physician, Dr. Abebe, a wise and compassionate man who had, several years prior, saved his life from a severe cardiac arrest. "Doctor," Kwame whispered, the urgency palpable in his tone, "I need your help to execute a most unusual plan." The doctor, a man who had seen much of human nature, regarded him for a long, contemplative moment, his gaze searching. Then, with an air of profound understanding, he gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Kwame, my friend," Dr. Abebe said softly, "people, I have found, only reveal their truest, unmasked selves when they believe they are no longer being observed, when the curtains of societal expectation are drawn." And so, the intricate and perilous scheme was meticulously set in motion. By the week's end, the fabricated news had spread like a devastating bushfire across the nation. Kwame Mensah, the billionaire philanthropist and property tycoon, was deceased. The stated cause, carefully chosen for its plausibility, an abrupt, fatal cardiac arrest. A private, family-only interment was swiftly arranged. Family, business associates, and the national media mourned, or at least performed the rituals of mourning. But the clandestine events that were about to transpire within the cold, imposing walls of that manor following the supposed death of its patriarch would send unprecedented shockwaves across the entire Republic of Songhai. 3 sleek, dark SUVs, their tinted windows obscuring their occupants, were stationed like sentinels outside the imposing gates of the Mensah residence the day after the tycoon's purported passing. The house, usually a hub of vibrant activity, now teemed with guests clad in the traditional funereal attire of black lace and somber, flowing agbatas. Mourners arrived in droves, their voices hushed, their expressions carefully molded into masks of sorrow, offering superficial, pre-rehearsed condolences to the supposedly bereaved family. However, within the sanctuary of the master bedroom, behind a securely locked door, a starkly different and deeply unsettling scene was unfolding. Sophia Mensah, now officially a wealthy widow, stood before a grand, ornate mirror, meticulously adjusting her black wrapper, ensuring it draped her figure to maximum effect. She dabbed feigned tears from beneath her eyes with a delicate lace handkerchief. She was not weeping. On the contrary, a subtle, almost triumphant beam played on her lips. She applied a bold slash of crimson lipstick, humming softly to herself, a tune of liberation. Behind her, her closest friend, Adana, a woman who knew Sophia better than most, observed with a deeply suspicious and disapproving gaze, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Sophia," Adana finally said, her voice a low reprimand, "your husband, the father of your children, passed away only yesterday. Why are you attired and behaving as if you are preparing for a grand festivity, a celebration?" Sophia scoffed, a dismissive sound, and turned, her eyes glittering. "Oh, my dear, naive Adana, please spare me your sanctimonious platitudes. That man, Kwame, was gone from my life, from my heart, long before his body finally ceased to breathe. Do you have any conceivable idea how many precious years of my youth, my vitality, I've squandered as his reluctant captive in this opulent, gilded cage?" Adana raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow, her disapproval palpable. "But still, he was your husband, Sophia, the man you vowed to cherish." "Still what?" Sophia interjected sharply, a dry, humorless chuckle escaping her lips. "I bore him children. I dedicated my youth, my beauty, to him. And what, pray tell, did he offer me in return? A cold, sterile residence filled with expensive objects but devoid of passion, and a tedious, predictable life of social obligations. This, my friend, is not mourning. This is my long-awaited liberation celebration. Tonight, I toast to my new existence, to freedom. Downstairs, in the formal living room, Aisha, seemingly oblivious to any genuine grief, was engrossed in her smartphone, her thumbs flying across the screen. She meticulously curated and posted a monochrome photograph of her father, accompanied by a caption dripping with insincerity. "Rest in peace, Daddy. Forever in our hearts." Red heart, but she, too, was not shedding any genuine tears. Her eyes were dry, her focus entirely on the likes and comments accumulating on her post. Chinedu, meanwhile, had sequestered himself in the expansive study, already deeply engaged in a series of urgent calls with the company's legal counsel. "Yes, barrister," he stated calmly, his voice devoid of emotion, his feet audaciously propped on his late father's polished mahogany desk. "I understand the will has not been officially read yet, but let's be pragmatic and efficient here. I am the eldest son, the natural successor. We all discern, with absolute clarity, who inherits the empire now, don't we?" Meanwhile, in a discreet, well-fortified safe house nestled deep within the secluded Rift Valley hideout, miles away from the charade, Kwame sat with Kofi and Dr. Abeba, his face a mask of anguish as he observed everything unfold on a series of hidden camera feeds. His hands trembled slightly, betraying his inner turmoil as he watched Sophia, his wife of decades, gracefully pour rich, red wine into two delicate crystal glasses. One for herself, and the other for— "Hold on a moment," Kwame said, his voice raspy, narrowing his eyes in disbelief. "Who is that gentleman she is admitting? I don't recognize him as a regular visitor." The camera angle shifted, revealing Sophia opening the grand front door to admit Diallo, Kwame's company's ambitious financial director, a man known for his tall, suave demeanor, his expensive suits, and for invariably lingering a bit too long, with a little too much familiarity, during board meetings and social functions. "Diallo, darling," Sophia purred, her voice like velvet, handing him a glass. "To fresh starts and new beginnings." Diallo clinked his glass against hers, his laugh a little too loud, a little too suggestive. "To liberty, my dear, beautiful widow. May your mourning be brief and your future prosperous." Kwame's heart, already bruised, shattered into a million irreparable pieces. His wife, the mother of his children, celebrating with another man, her lover, while the world supposedly mourned his passing. "She didn't even wait a single day," he whispered, the words catching in his throat, raw with pain. Kofi, ever the steadfast companion, gently touched his shoulder, offering silent support. "Sir, are you absolutely certain you wish to proceed with this agonizing spectacle? There is still time to stop." Kwame wiped his face with a trembling hand, his resolve hardening amidst the pain. "Yes, Kofi, let us continue observing. I need to see the full extent of their actions, the depths of their betrayal." And indeed, they would go far, further than even Kwame, in his darkest moments, had imagined. By the following morning, Aisha, with callous efficiency, would list Kwame's antique, diamond-encrusted Rolex on a Farimart for a fortune, eager to convert sentiment into cash. Chinedu, with chilling pragmatism, would instruct the family driver to begin preparing the necessary documents for an immediate and complete company takeover. And Sophia, the grieving widow, would contact the lawyer, her voice betraying a hint of impatience, to inquire precisely when she could access the substantial life insurance funds. But none of them, in their greed and haste, were aware. The deceased was watching, listening, and recording every damning detail. The Mensa residence was still adorned with funereal black ribbons, stark against the pristine white walls, but the pervasive gloom that had settled within its rooms had no connection whatsoever to genuine mourning. It had been merely 3 short days since the billionaire's supposed demise, yet the living, his own flesh and blood, were already dismantling his hard-earned empire with the rapacious hunger of vultures circling a fresh carcass. Aisha, a vision in high heels and a vibrant silk blouse that was decidedly unmorning-like, stood poised on the grand staircase, her phone pressed tightly to her ear, her voice sharp and demanding. "Yes, I clearly said 10,000 United States dollars, she declared, rolling her eyes with theatrical impatience at the unseen buyer on the other end. "The watch is absolutely genuine, a vintage masterpiece, and it belonged to my late father, Kwame Mensah. It's a highly sought-after collector's piece, and I demand full payment in untraceable cryptocurrency, if you please." She then turned abruptly to the startled housemaid hovering nearby and snapped, her tone imperious. "Where's that designer handbag I asked you to fetch an hour ago? The crocodile skin one Daddy gave me for my 18th birthday? I intend to list that online next, while the market for deceased tycoon's daughter's accessories is still hot." Meanwhile, in the hallowed confines of the private study, Chinedu sat opposite Barrister Adebayo, the family's long-standing and highly respected lawyer, a man of quiet dignity. "We cannot, under any circumstances, unseal the will yet, Mr. Chinedu," the lawyer stated firmly, adjusting his spectacles with a sigh of weary disapproval. "Your father, Mr. Mensah, clearly and unequivocally stipulated in writing that it must only be read precisely 30 days after his passing, not a day sooner." Chinedu leaned forward, his voice dropping to a frigid, menacing tone. "My father, Barrister, is deceased. Gone. The company, a multi-billion Sadie entity, cannot operate efficiently on instructions from a ghost, can it? I want my name, Chinedu Kwame Mensah, on all board accounts and signatory documents immediately." Barrister Adebayo sighed again, a sound of deep resignation. "Mr. Chinedu, with all due respect for your grief, legal procedures and testamentary protocols do not function that way. There are processes that must be adhered to." Chinedu's thin, practiced smile vanished, replaced by a chillingly predatory expression. "Then perhaps, Barrister Adebayo, we require a new, more cooperative lawyer, one who understands the urgencies of the living." Back in the concealed, soundproofed room in the Rift Valley hideout, Kwame Mensah sat motionless, a statue carved from grief, his eyes fixated on the multiple screens displaying the betrayal unfolding in his home. "They are devouring my flesh, picking my bones clean, while I still draw breath," he muttered, his voice hoarse with disbelief and a dawning, cold fury. Kofi, his loyal friend, nodded grimly, his own heart heavy for his master. "The woman you cherished above all others, sir. The children you nurtured and provided for, expecting only love in return." "Mere strangers," Kwame whispered, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "Worse than strangers. I perished, truly perished, the moment their love and respect for me died, long before this charade began." But the full extent of the treachery was not yet complete. There were deeper circles of this familial hell yet to be revealed. That evening, a gleaming, brand-new black Mercedes, far more ostentatious than Diallo's usual vehicle, glided silently into the mansion grounds. The imposing gates swung open wide, wider and more welcomingly than they ever had for Kwame himself in recent years. Mr. Diallo, the ambitious financial director and Safia's new, openly displayed paramour, emerged. Safia greeted him at the massive front door, swathed in a seductive red silk wrapper, her perfume so potent it seemed to suffocate any lingering remnants of loyalty or decency in the air. "You look absolutely exquisite, my dear widow Mensah," Diallo smiled, his eyes openly admiring her, stepping inside with an air of ownership. "Address me as queen, darling," she retorted, her laughter sharp and brittle. "The king is dead. Long live the new reign, our reign." They sat at the expansive mahogany dining table, a table once reserved for cherished family repasts and heartfelt conversations, and openly discussed matters that made Kwame's blood boil with a rage he hadn't felt in decades, even watching from afar. "I've been contemplating Diallo," Safia said, casually sipping her expensive red wine, her eyes gleaming with avarice. "Why don't we consider renaming the company? Something like Safia Global Holdings?" Something modern that reflects the future, our future, not the dusty, irrelevant past. Diallo chuckled, a low, appreciative sound. Your husband's memory isn't even cold yet, my ambitious Sophia. Neither was his heart. Towards the end, she replied dismissively, her voice laced with a bitterness that surprised even Kwame. He provided a life of suffocating affluence, yes, but no genuine passion, no thrill, no real enjoyment. I owe him no tears, no prolonged mourning. Outside the imposing walls of the mansion, under the ancient, sprawling branches of a baobab tree, Mama Esi, a humble elderly woman known for her quiet piety, sat alone, holding a single flickering candle, her lips moving in fervent prayer in her native Ga tongue. May divine justice, swift and unerring, punish every malicious tongue and deceitful heart, she whispered into the cool night air, her eyes closed. May the departed, if wronged, arise and speak when falsehoods and injustice gain traction and seek to prevail. Inside the hidden room in the Rift Valley hideout, Kwame wiped his tear-streaked face, the raw emotion almost overwhelming him. I entrusted them with everything, he said, his voice choked. My heart, my empire, my legacy, my very name. They've interred you while you still live, sir. Buried you under their greed. Kofi stated quietly, his words a somber echo of Kwame's thoughts. What, my chief, will you do now? Kwame sat up slowly, his posture straightening, his voice suddenly calm, yet laden with the ominous weight of thunder gathering behind distant clouds. I am going to haunt them, Kofi. I am going to haunt them thoroughly while I still draw breath, and they will learn the true meaning of consequence. The morning sun peeked tentatively through the dissipating clouds, casting fleeting golden rays upon the meticulously manicured lawns of the Mensa estate. But there was no corresponding warmth to be found inside the grand mansion, only the palpable chill of unchecked greed thickening in the air like acrid smoke. Sophia, dressed to the nines, stepped confidently into Mr. Bakery's well-appointed city office, the premises of the family's long-standing insurance agent. Her all-black designer ensemble hugged her still enviable figure perfectly, meticulously paired with an expensive luxury handbag and glittering diamond earrings that caught the light. One would never, ever guess that her husband, a prominent figure in the nation, had just passed away mere days ago. Madame Sophia, the agent, Mr. Bakery, a cautious and observant man, said politely, rising from his chair. My deepest condolences, once again. How may I be of assistance to you today? She managed to conjure a practiced, sorrowful sigh, a masterpiece of feigned grief. It concerns my late, beloved husband's life insurance policy, Mr. Bakery. I'm here, with a heavy heart, to file the claim. Mr. Bakery frowned slightly, a subtle twitch of his eyebrow the only outward sign of his disapproval. So soon, Madame Mensa? The funeral rites are barely concluded, if I recall correctly. She offered a faint, wan smile, designed to elicit sympathy. Life, as they say, must proceed, Mr. Bakery. We have ongoing obligations, financial commitments, and my dear children, Aisha and Chinidu, require stability and security during this trying time. Mr. Bakery, maintaining his professional composure, opened the thick file bearing Kwame Mensa's name. Indeed. You are listed as the sole beneficiary, madam. The policy sum is 900 million Sadie, tax-exempt. Sophia's eyes, for a fleeting, unguarded moment, glinted with the unmistakable light of a plunderer who has just located a vast, unguarded treasure in the dead of night. And when, Mr. Bakery, can the funds be processed and transferred? She inquired, her voice smooth as silk, barely concealing her eagerness. In approximately 3 weeks, madam, he replied, his tone neutral. Standard verification protocols must be observed, you understand. She forced another smile, this one tighter than the last. Very well, I shall wait patiently. Just do not, please, keep me waiting any longer than is absolutely necessary. But outside the confines of Mr. Bakery's office, a small, almost invisible hidden camera, shrewdly installed by Kwame weeks prior as a precautionary measure, captured every word, every avaricious glint in her eye. Back in the Rift Valley hideout, Kwame stared intently at the damning footage, his lips tightening into a thin, hard line. So, my entire life, my existence, is valued at precisely 900 million Sadie to her. Kofi leaned forward, his voice filled with a quiet indignation. Sir, with all due respect, she was never truly your wife in spirit, merely a well-attired, exceptionally cunning predator waiting for her moment. That same night, Aisha, embracing her newfound freedom, hosted an exclusive, lavish soiree at the manor with her coterie of equally shallow influencer friends. Flickering candlelight danced on the polished marble table, laden with champagne and expensive canapes, and bursts of shrill laughter echoed through the once somber house. I swear to you all, Aisha declared, sipping her champagne with a flourish, her voice carrying across the room, this man, my father, dying was the most unexpectedly fortuitous event that could have possibly happened to me. Her closest friend, a vapid girl named Beezy, gasped dramatically. Aisha, how can you say such a thing? Aisha merely giggled, a high-pitched, careless sound. Oh, I absolutely mean it, darling. I was practically confined in a luxurious cage before his departure. No late nights, no spontaneous trips to glamorous international destinations, no real fun. Now I finally do as I please when I please. And the finances, Aisha? Are they adequate? Her friend whispered conspiratorially, leaning closer. More than adequate, Beezy. Abundant. Aisha smirked, a flash of her mother's cunning in her eyes. Daddy, bless his departed soul, left so much behind. It's like hitting the ultimate jackpot. And the best part? The will hasn't even been officially read yet, so there's more to come. But something entirely unforeseen, a small, overlooked detail in Kwame's grand plan, occurred later that night. As Aisha, feeling particularly audacious, opened her father's private personal library, a room she had rarely entered when he was alive, to take a series of provocative selfies, theatrically wearing his heavy gold wristwatch and lounging in his imposing leather chair, she accidentally knocked over a small, intricately carved wooden box on his desk. From within it, a hidden drawer sprung open, and a small, innocuous black digital recorder rolled out onto the plush carpet. She picked it up, her brow furrowed in perplexity, and, driven by idle curiosity, pressed the play button. A familiar voice, crisp and clear, filled the silent room. This is Kwame Mensah. If you are hearing this recording, it means I am not deceased as reported. I am very much alive, and I am observing everything. And everything you, my beloved family, have done since my passing, I have meticulously recorded. Aisha froze mid-pose. Her hand, the one holding the recorder, began to tremble violently. Her perfectly made-up face drained of all color, leaving her looking like a startled ghost. Back in the Rift Valley hideout, watching this unfold on his monitor, Kwame allowed himself a grim, dark smile. Let the apprehension, the fear of reckoning, commence. The very next morning, a frantic Aisha, her usual composure shattered, rushed unceremoniously into her mother's opulent bedroom. Mother, she cried, her voice cracking with panic, we have a significant, a monumental problem. Sophia, unperturbed, was calmly applying her signature red lipstick, preparing for another day of widowhood. What is it this time, Aisha? Another bill you can't pay? Aisha, breathless, threw the small black recorder onto the vast, silk-covered bed. Father isn't dead, Mother. He's alive. He's been testing us, watching us all along. Sophia, her hand momentarily pausing its task, picked up the device with an air of skepticism, pressed play, and listened intently to Kwame's recorded message. Her hand tightened around the recorder until her knuckles showed white. No, she whispered, her voice barely audible, her eyes wide with disbelief and dawning horror. This cannot be true. It's a trick. Just then, as if orchestrated by fate itself, her personal phone, lying on the bedside table, buzzed insistently. An unknown number. With a sense of dread, she answered. Hello, Mrs. Sophia Mensah. A calm, professional voice on the other end stated, "This is a courtesy call from the Consolidated Insurance Group. I believe you are currently attempting to access your late husband's life insurance policy. Please be advised that a temporary hold has been placed on the file, effective immediately, by Mr. Kwame Mensah himself." Sophia dropped the phone as if it had burned her hand. Aisha gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Chinedu, drawn by the commotion, ran in from the hallway, his face a mask of inquiry. "What in God's name is transpiring here? What's wrong?" Sophia's lips trembled uncontrollably. "He's alive, Chinedu. Your father, he's alive." The grand salon of the Mensah residence was uncomfortably crowded that Sunday afternoon. Friends, distant relatives, influential church elders, and curious neighbors had gathered, ostensibly for a prayer memorial service for the late Kwame Mensah. Rows of flickering candles lined the walls, casting long, dancing shadows. A large, professionally taken portrait of Kwame, looking distinguished and benevolent, sat on a white-draped table, adorned with a giant black ribbon that bore the sentiment, "Departed too soon." Soft, mournful gospel music played discreetly in the background as people whispered in hushed tones and nodded solemnly, performing their roles in this public display of grief. Sophia stood at the front, a veritable paragon of grieving virtue in her elegant black lace attire, gently, almost theatrically, dabbing her eyes with a pristine white handkerchief. Aisha, beside her, wore oversized dark sunglasses, attempting to look bereaved but instead looking merely bored, and chewed gum incessantly. Chinedu paced restlessly near the large bay window, feigning to receive a series of urgent, hushed calls on his mobile phone. A portly pastor, radiating solemnity, cleared his throat and lifted a well-worn Bible. "My dear brothers and sisters in Christ, let us commence this solemn service by remembering the exemplary life of our beloved brother, Kwame Mensah." Suddenly, with a loud, grating creak, the main salon door swung open. A sudden gust of wind, seemingly from nowhere, blew through the room, making some of the candles flicker violently and a few even extinguished. Every head in the room turned, a collective gasp rippling through the assembly. Standing silhouetted in the doorway was a man, tall and imposing, clad in a simple, yet regal, white kaftan, calm, composed, and undeniably, shockingly alive. It was Kwame Mensah. Gasps of disbelief and terror filled the room. Chairs scraped loudly against the marble floor as people recoiled or jumped to their feet. Someone screamed, a piercing shriek of shock. One elderly woman, a distant aunt, fainted instantly, slumping onto the floor. Aisha dropped her champagne flute, the sound shattering the tense silence. Sophia's hand, the one clutching the handkerchief, began to shake uncontrollably. Chinedu backed up slowly, his eyes wide with terror, as if he had encountered a vengeful specter from the grave. "Heavens above," someone shouted from the back. Is that the deceased man?" Another whispered, their voice trembling. Kwame stepped in slowly, deliberately, his footsteps echoing with unnerving clarity across the polished marble floor. He looked around the stunned room, his face an impassive mask, his eyes sharp and piercing, missing nothing. "Good afternoon, everyone," he said, his voice calm but carrying to every corner of the room. "I heard you were gathered here today, praying for the repose of my soul." No one moved. No one spoke. Sophia, her legs giving way beneath her, dropped to her knees, her carefully constructed composure shattering. "Kwame, my husband, is this real? Are you truly alive?" He walked closer, stopping directly in front of her. "Alive, Sophia. And profoundly, immeasurably disappointed." Aisha stammered, her sunglasses askew. But father, we saw your coffin at the interment." "It was empty, Aisha," he replied coldly, his gaze unwavering, "just like the loyalty and love in this very house." The pastor, his Bible slipping from his nerveless fingers and thudding to the floor, exclaimed, "My goodness, it's a miracle. A true resurrection." Kwame turned his attention to the stunned guests. "Thank you all for attending, for your concern, but I do not require your prayers at this moment. I require answers." He then faced his kneeling wife, his voice like chips of ice. "Tell me, Sophia, my dear wife, why were you arranging illicit festivities and romantic rendezvous with Mr. Diallo the very night I supposedly died?" Sophia's lips trembled, her eyes darting around helplessly. "Kwame, it is not as it appears. I can explain." "Oh, really? Then perhaps you can explain this." Kwame pulled a small remote control from his kaftan pocket and clicked it. A hidden projector, cleverly installed on the opposite wall, flickered to life. Surreptitious, undeniable video footage began to play, Sophia laughing and toasting with Diallo, her demeanor anything but mournful, Aisha callously selling his cherished personal belongings online for quick cash, Chinedu arrogantly discussing a premature company takeover with lawyers. Gasps, louder this time, rippled through the crowd, spreading like wildfire. The entire room was plunged into a stunned, mortified silence, save for the audio from the damning recordings. Kwame turned to the now visibly horrified crowd. "This, my friends, my associates, my neighbors, this is my family." Aisha, finally understanding the depth of her exposure, tore off her sunglasses, her eyes filled with desperate tears. "Father, please, I beg you." He raised a hand, cutting her off sharply. "Spare me your crocodile tears, Aisha. I gave you life, every luxury, every opportunity. You, in turn, attempted to profit handsomely from my death." Chinedu, attempting a brave front, stepped forward, his voice strained. "Look, father, it was an error in judgment, a misunderstanding." Kwame's voice rose, cracking like a whip. "An error, Chinedu? You forged documents. You conspired to seize my legacy. You desired me buried and forgotten faster than my body could naturally decay." Sophia cried out, her voice a wail of despair. "I was hurt, Kwame. I was grieving. I thought I had lost you forever." "You never truly had me, Sophia, not in your heart," he snapped, his patience utterly exhausted. "You were far too preoccupied with auditioning and securing my successor." He turned once more to the assembled crowd, his voice resonating with righteous indignation. "To everyone present, this charade, this elaborate deception, is why I faked my death, to unveil the unvarnished, ugly truth, to see the hearts of those I held closest." A heavy, profound silence descended upon the room. Then, Kwame delivered the final, devastating blow, his words precise and irrevocable. "I have, as of this morning, altered my last will and testament. From this day forward, my entire estate, every last sadi, every property, every share, belongs to the sole individual who stood by me with genuine, unselfish loyalty. Mama Esi's grandson, Django. He and he alone is my legal and chosen heir." More gasps, this time of utter astonishment. Aisha, overwhelmed, fainted dramatically. Chinedu shouted, his voice raw with disbelief. "What? That boy." Sophia simply collapsed in a heap, sobbing uncontrollably, her world crumbling around her. But Kwame, his task accomplished, turned and walked out the door just as calmly and deliberately as he had entered, this time not as a haunting phantom, but as a man resurrected with a clear, unwavering purpose. The morning after Kwame's shocking, theatrical return, the Kumasi Grand Manor was quieter than a forgotten cemetery at midnight. No bustling staff preparing breakfast, no curious guests lingering in the hallways, no light, cheerful laughter echoing from the usually busy kitchen, just an oppressive, echoing silence. Sophia sat alone in the once grand, now hollow-feeling dining room, staring blankly at her untouched, cold cup of tea. Her elaborate makeup from the previous night's disastrous memorial was smudged beneath her eyes, creating dark, mournful circles, and her expensive wig sat askew on her head, a symbol of her dishevelment. She hadn't slept a wink. She couldn't sleep. The chilling echo of Kwame's final, damning words haunted her like a malevolent, inescapable spirit. "You never truly had me." You were too preoccupied with finding my successor. In the span of a few short hours, she had plummeted from the enviable position of a billionaire's revered wife to that of a publicly disgraced, ridiculed charlatan. Suddenly, the distinct, unwelcome sound of a large vehicle engine rumbling outside snapped her out of her miserable reverie. She rushed, with uncharacteristic haste, to the balcony overlooking the main driveway, just in time to see a large, battered moving truck pulling up to the front entrance. Eviction order, court approved, was printed in bold, stark letters on its dusty side. A uniformed bailiff, holding a sheaf of official-looking papers, stepped out. "Are you Mrs. Sophia Mensah?" he inquired, his tone impersonal. "Yes," she replied slowly, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. "You have precisely 2 hours to gather your personal belongings and vacate the premises. This house and all its contents now legally belongs to Mr. Django Mensah, by order of the High Court." Sophia's legs buckled beneath her. She grabbed the ornate iron railing of the balcony to steady herself, her knuckles white. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. "This is an error. A mistake. This cannot possibly be transpiring." But it was. Inside, in her lavishly decorated bedroom, Aisha was weeping hysterically, her expensive mascara streaming down her cheeks in black rivulets. First, he feigns his own death, traumatizing us all. Now he bequeaths his entire fortune, everything we thought was ours, to some uneducated village boy, she screamed, her voice hoarse with rage and disbelief. How could father do this to us, his own children? Chinedu, his face pale and drawn, barged into her room, clutching his phone tightly. "It's worse than you think, Aisha. All our personal and joint accounts are frozen. He has blocked all the credit cards. We possess absolutely nothing." "Nothing?" Aisha's jaw dropped, her eyes wide with incredulity. "You are deceiving me, Chinedu? This is just another one of his cruel games. Check your bank balance then if you don't believe me," Chinedu snapped, his own composure cracking. She fumbled for her phone, her hands shaking, and logged into her banking app. 47 naira, and 20 kobo. She whispered, the reality of their utter ruin sinking in. Just then, 2 burly workmen, looking impassive, walked into Aisha's room and began to assess the furniture for removal. "Please, I beg you, do not touch that antique dresser," Aisha begged, desperately clinging to a prized Italian commode. "That is all I have remaining of value." "Madam," one of the workers said, not unkindly but firmly, "we are merely performing our assigned duties. We have our instructions." Meanwhile, miles away, at a humble, yet spotlessly clean, dwelling in the less affluent Dakar suburbs, Kwame stood beside Django, a quiet, inherently respectful young man in his early 20s. Django was dressed in simple, clean trousers and a neatly pressed white shirt, his demeanor one of bewildered humility. "Sir, with all due respect, I do not comprehend," Django said softly, his voice barely above a whisper, his eyes filled with confusion. "Why me, of all people? I am nobody." Kwame looked at him, his own eyes weary from the ordeal but now holding a gentle, paternal smile. "Because, Django, you are the only one in my entire orbit who offered genuine, unadulterated affection and loyalty without a hidden agenda. Without an exorbitant price tag attached." Django's eyes welled up with unshed tears. "But sir, I only polished your shoes, fetched your newspapers, and occasionally ran small errands. And in doing so with such consistent diligence and respect, Django," Kwame said, his voice imbued with a profound sincerity, "you unknowingly cleansed my jaded soul and reminded me of what true, simple human decency looks like." He handed Django a thick brown manila envelope. "This contains the official deed to the Kumasi Grand Manor, and this," he pulled out a heavy, gold-nibbed fountain pen, "this, my boy, is your future. Sign it, and I shall personally teach you everything you need to know to lead the Mensah Empire with integrity and wisdom." Django's hand shook visibly as he took the pen and signed his name on the documents, his signature transforming his life in an instant. Back at the now former Mensa residence, Safia was standing barefoot and disheveled in the dusty driveway, a pathetic pile of hastily packed designer bags beside her. She watched, numb with disbelief, as unfamiliar strangers methodically carried out the last vestiges of the opulent life she had once commanded with such arrogance. Aisha and Chinidu stood silently behind her, defeated, disowned, disinherited, and utterly disgraced in the eyes of society. Just then, a sleek black SUV, identical to the ones that had brought the mourners, pulled up slowly beside them. The heavily tinted windows rolled down silently, revealing Kwame, sitting impassively in the back seat. Safia, galvanized by a final, desperate hope, ran forward, her bare feet stumbling on the gravel. "Kwame, my husband, please, I implore you." He looked her directly in the eye, his gaze cold and unwavering, devoid of any lingering affection. "I loved you once, Safia," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "Truly I did. But you, with your insatiable avarice and deceit, you buried me alive long before I staged my own death." Then, without another word, he pressed the button, and the window glided up, sealing her off. The SUV drove away, leaving her in a cloud of dust and despair. Safia collapsed to her knees on the hard, unforgiving ground, and for the very first time since his supposed death, she truly, genuinely wept, not for him, but for herself, for the irretrievable loss of her status, her wealth, and her future. Django stood silently, almost reverently, at the imposing entrance of the Kumasi Grand Manor, the very place where, not so long ago, he used to humbly deliver firewood and meticulously clean the shoes of its wealthy occupants. Only now, the giant, ornate iron gates, symbols of power and exclusion, swung open smoothly and welcomingly for him. He stepped inside slowly, cautiously, wearing a simple but elegant clean blue kaftan, specially sewn for this momentous occasion. Behind him, a few paces back, was Kwame, who watched Django's every hesitant step with a quiet, profound pride. "From today, Django," Kwame said, his voice gentle but firm, "this magnificent place is your home. But remember this always. Wealth does not, and should not, alter who you fundamentally are. It merely, and often cruelly, reveals who you have always been deep inside." Django nodded, his expression serious and thoughtful. "Yes, sir. I understand, and I will not forget." Inside, the remaining household staff, those who hadn't been dismissed for their overt disloyalty, stood in a nervous, uncertain line: drivers, cleaners, cooks, gardeners. Some among them had openly mocked Django in the past, dismissing him as insignificant. Others had barely registered his existence at all. One of the older drivers, a man named Musa, whispered surreptitiously to the head maid, a stern woman named Fatima, "So, this boy, will lead us now?" "The firewood delivery boy, giving us orders." The head maid, Fatima, shot him a sharp, warning glance. "Be silent, Musa, and show respect. The supposedly dead man, our powerful master, returned from the grave specifically for this boy. That signifies something profound, something we ordinary mortals may not yet comprehend." In the main hall, amidst the lingering scent of expensive polish and old money, Barrister Adebayo arrived, carrying a briefcase filled with the final legal documents. "Congratulations, Mr. Django Mensah," the lawyer said, extending his hand with genuine warmth. "Everything is now legally and irrevocably in your name. All properties, the controlling business shares in Mensa Holdings, all associated bank accounts." Django's hands trembled slightly as he took the weighty folder, the reality of his new life beginning to sink in. "Thank you, barrister sir. But what if people, important people, do not accept me? What if they see me only as I was?" "You do not require their acceptance, young man," Barrister Adebayo said kindly but firmly, his eyes wise. "Only their respect, which you must earn. And more importantly, you require a clear purpose. The very same individuals who may laugh at you today, who may underestimate you, will be the first to applaud you tomorrow if you lead with unwavering integrity, courage, and vision. But not everyone in the city was preparing to applaud. At a nearby, nondescript, and decidedly downmarket guest house, reeking of stale cigarettes and desperation, Safia, now stripped of all her titles and finery, sat huddled with a sullen Aisha and a furious Chinidu. They were sipping lukewarm sachet water, a stark contrast to the vintage champagne they had so recently enjoyed. "I still cannot believe this nightmare is real," Aisha muttered, picking at a loose thread on the cheap bedspread. "That boy, that rustic, inheriting everything." Chinita slammed his fist on the rickety wooden table, making the water sachets jump. "This is utter insanity. An outrage. He lacks a formal degree. He lacks sophistication, experience, pedigree. He knows nothing of our world." Safia's face, once beautiful and animated, had darkened into a mask of bitter resentment. "He does not merit our life, our legacy," she hissed, her voice low and venomous. "And if Kwame, that senile old fool, believes this farce is concluded, he is gravely mistaken. This is far from over." Back at the Grand Manor, Django took a slow, solitary walk through the numerous opulent rooms. Each space, each piece of furniture, each painting on the wall, seemed to whisper memories at him, some surprisingly beautiful, fleeting moments of kindness he'd observed from afar, others heavy with the recent, raw betrayal he had witnessed. He paused at the enormous, polished dining table and, after a moment's hesitation, sat in Kwame's old, imposing leather chair at its head. The rich leather creaked softly beneath his unaccustomed weight. Mama Esi, his beloved grandmother, who had been brought to the manor by Kwame, walked in quietly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears of disbelief and joy. "My grandson," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "I used to scrub this very floor on my hands and knees, dreaming of a better life for you." Django stood quickly and took her frail, work-worn hand in his. "Now, Grandma," he said softly, his own eyes moist, "you shall walk on it like the queen you are." Kwame, observing this tender scene from the upstairs balcony, allowed a faint, rare smile to touch his lips. But downstairs, in the corporate heart of the city, whispers of discontent and rebellion were growing louder. Some influential board members of Mensa Holdings, men who had prospered under Kwame, had gathered for an unscheduled, emergency meeting. This village boy, this upstart, cannot possibly lead us," one of them, a portly man named Chief Adelik, declared, his jowls quivering with indignation. "We have built this vast empire with decades of experience, with shrewd negotiation, not with misguided pity or sentimentality." Another, a younger, more aggressive director, snapped, "It is merely a temporary phase, a foolish old man's whim. We wait patiently. We watch. He is bound to falter, to make a catastrophic mistake, and then we step in." But Kwame, ever the strategist, had already foreseen this potential insurrection. He sent a curt, unambiguous message to the entire board. "Django will attend the next scheduled board meeting, and he will speak. He has my full authority. If any man among you attempts to obstruct him, to undermine his position, he is free to tender his resignation and depart permanently from Mensa Holdings." Django's true trial, the battle for control and respect, was not yet over. It was only just beginning. If he failed this crucial test, the empire Kwame had painstakingly built would undoubtedly crumble into ruin. If he succeeded, he would become the most unexpected, the most improbable, business magnate in the entire history of the Republic of Songhai. The main boardroom of the Mensa Holdings Spire, located on the top floor with panoramic city views, was characteristically sharp, imposing, silent, and cold, like the heavily guarded interior of a subterranean bank vault. Its long, gleaming marble table was polished to such a high shine it reflected the anxious faces around it. 12 heavy, ergonomically designed chairs surrounded it, chairs usually occupied by powerful, seasoned men who had worn expensive bespoke suits for longer than Django had worn proper shoes. Today, those very men sat stiffly, their discomfort palpable, murmuring in hushed, discontented tones under their breath. And at the head of that formidable table, looking remarkably composed in a dark navy suit that had been expertly sewn overnight by Kwame's personal tailor, stood Django. He appeared outwardly calm, his posture straight, but inside, his heart was pounding like a trapped drum. The head of logistics, a Mr. Canny, a man known for his sharp tongue and skepticism, cleared his throat with exaggerated deliberation. "Mr. Django," he said, his lips curved into a thinly veiled, condescending smile. "It is not that we, the board, do not respect your unexpected appointment by our esteemed founder, but you must surely concede, young man, that leading a complex, multi-billion Sadie international company is not precisely something that is taught in the firewood markets or while polishing shoes." A low, rumbling wave of cynical laughter rippled quietly around the table. Django nodded slowly, acknowledging the jibe without flinching. "You are absolutely correct, sir. Such intricate business acumen is not taught there. But then again, sir, unwavering loyalty, integrity, and a genuine concern for the welfare of others are not commonly taught in boardrooms either, are they? I observed, from my humble vantage point, how this magnificent empire was painstakingly constructed, brick by brick, deal by deal. And I also observed, with great sadness, how some of you here today were so quick, so eager, to plan its dismantlement the very moment my benefactor, Mr. Mensa, supposedly passed from this world." The room fell into an abrupt, uncomfortable silence. Mr. Adekunle, the ambitious head of finance, leaned forward, his eyes narrowed. "And what precisely, Mr. Django, do you intend to do with us, now that you hold the reins?" Django calmly pulled out a surprisingly thick folder from the briefcase beside him and placed it on the table. "Detailed audit reports, sir. Evidence of backdated embezzlement schemes, unfortunately. Records of clandestine side deals with our direct competitors. It appears some of you, gentlemen, ceased to be truly loyal to Mensa Holdings long before my arrival on the scene." Alarmed whispers erupted around the table, faces paling. "I did not come here to play sovereign, to exact revenge, or to indulge in petty power games," Django said firmly, his voice gaining strength and resonance. "I came here to protect my benefactor's hard-earned legacy, to ensure its continued prosperity. If you choose to collaborate with me, with honesty and dedication, I will honor your contributions and expertise. If, however, you choose to work against me, to undermine this company," he paused, his gaze sweeping across each face, "I will, without hesitation, dismiss you." The silence that followed was so thick, so charged, you could almost hear the dust motes settling in the air, the paper in their hands breathe. Then, to everyone's utter astonishment and disbelief, the heavy boardroom door swung open and Kwame Mensa himself walked into the room, slow and steady, his presence as powerful and commanding as a lion surveying his domain. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable authority, his eyes scanning each member of the board with piercing intensity. "I am, as you can plainly see, still very much alive." A collective gasp went around the table. "But," he continued, "I am finished with leading this company directly. The young man you see before you, Django, is my unequivocal choice, my successor. And, more importantly, he is my blood." More gasps, louder this time, mixed with murmurs of shock and disbelief. "Yes," Kwame continued, his gaze unwavering. "Django is my son. The result of a regrettable error I made in my impetuous youth, an error I concealed for too long, but an error I will never again regret acknowledging." Django's hands, resting on the table, began to shake. He had never, ever heard this earth-shattering revelation before. His mind reeled. But Kwame looked him directly in the eye, a look of profound affirmation. "You have passed every test, my son, with courage and integrity. Now, bear the crown you have so rightfully earned." One by one, slowly, hesitantly at first, then with growing conviction, the board members rose to their feet. Some offered a slight, respectful bow, others nodded, their expressions a mixture of surprise and newfound respect. Django, the boy from the village, the son previously unknown, had won the room. But far away from the gleaming corporate towers, in a dimly lit, smoke-filled backroom of an establishment in the notorious port city of Badagry, a place known for its illicit dealings, Safia, her face a mask of cold fury, sat across a scarred wooden table from a dangerous-looking man with reflector sunglasses that hid his eyes even in the dim light. His name was Zola, a notorious ex-convict and a ruthlessly efficient expert hacker, a ghost in the digital machine. "Can you accomplish what I require?" Safia whispered, her voice hoarse with malice, sliding a thick, unmarked envelope across the table. Zola picked it up, expertly riffled through the contents, stacks of high-denomination Sadie notes, and let out a low, appreciative whistle. "This is generous, madam. Half now, as agreed, and the other half upon successful completion." "Precisely," Safia said coldly, her eyes glittering with vindictive triumph. "I want Django Mensa's reputation utterly annihilated," she hissed, leaning closer, her voice dripping with venom. "His name, his carefully crafted image, his very being. I want him discredited, shamed, and crawling back to the squalor of the village he came from in utter ignominy, begging for scraps." Zola flashed a chilling, predatory smile, revealing a gold tooth. "Say no more, madam. Consider it done. By the time I am finished with him, this Django will fervently wish he had remained impoverished and unknown." The final, brutal conflict, a battle fought in the shadowy realms of cyberspace and public opinion, had just commenced. 2 eventful weeks after the dramatic boardroom victory, Django had begun to settle, albeit cautiously, into his new, almost surreal life. The Kumasi Grand Manor, under his surprisingly adept and fair-minded supervision, was running smoothly, the staff gradually shifting from wary suspicion to grudging, then genuine, respect. Kwame, though still mostly quiet and observant, watched him with an unmistakable look of paternal pride. And in the bustling city beyond the manor's gates, appreciative whispers began to spread through the business community of a new, unconventional kind of CEO, young, undeniably humble, yet surprisingly ruthless when it came to rooting out long-standing corruption. But far away, unseen and unheard, inside a grimy, anonymous internet cafe tucked away behind a noisy mechanics workshop in a labyrinthine Nima backstreet, Zola was meticulously at work. Multiple battered laptops were arrayed before him, screens filled with scrolling lines of complex code, surrounded by a litter of empty red energy drink cans. Target: Django Mensa. With practiced ease, he hacked into Mensa Holdings' old, less secure servers and with malicious precision, replaced Django's official corporate profile image with a demeaning, grainy photograph of him, years younger, humbly washing cars for a pittance. He then expertly forged a series of damning emails, skillfully doctoring a message thread to make it appear as though Django had solicited substantial bribes to secure a lucrative government contract. He disseminated these fabrications, along with other invented slanders, across a network of clandestine fake news blogs and shadowy social media accounts. Then came the final, devastating strike, a cunningly manipulated video. A genuine clip of Django passionately discussing reclaiming power and rooting out corruption within the company was twisted, through clever editing and voice modulation, into something that sounded like an arrogant, inflammatory tribal affront, designed to incite division and outrage. Within a mere 24 hours, the digital world caught fire. Hashtags like #FakeCEO, #FireDjangoMensa, and #CorruptionKingMensa trended virulently. The social media platforms exploded with outrage, condemnation, and calls for Django's immediate dismissal. Mainstream news stations, hungry for scandal, picked up the sensational story. Django Mensa, new CEO of Mensa Holdings, under fire for damaging bribery and tribalism allegations. Angry protesters, some genuinely misled, others likely paid instigators, began to gather menacingly outside the Mensa Holdings spire, waving placards and chanting slogans. Inside the previously pacified boardroom, The very same men who had reluctantly applauded Django just weeks earlier now shouted with renewed alarm, their fear for their own positions palpable. "Sir, Mr. Mensah, we must suspend him immediately. This escalating scandal could destroy our stock value, our reputation." One particularly agitated director slammed his fist on the marble table. "Kwame, with all due respect, this is precisely why we said he was not ready for this responsibility." Kwame, amidst the rising cacophony, stood silently, his expression unreadable, letting the storm of voices rage. Then, when a momentary lull occurred, he turned slowly to Django, who had been standing pale but resolute. "Speak, Django. Tell them." Django stood, facing the hostile board. His face was undeniably pale, and his hands, though clasped behind his back, trembled slightly, but his voice, when he spoke, was surprisingly steady and clear. "I did not write those fabricated emails. I did not, and would never, accept bribes. I have never, in my entire life, insulted any tribe or ethnic group, for I believe in the unity of our nation." A tense silence fell over the room. "I was poor, yes, that is true. I was unknown and insignificant to many, but I have never, ever been deceitful or corrupt." He then turned to a young, bright IT officer who was standing nervously by the large projector screen. "Mr. Akinwand, can you trace the digital origin of these malicious leaks, these fabricated stories?" The young officer nodded, gaining confidence from Django's calm demeanor. "Sir, we attempted to do so earlier this morning, but were initially blocked by sophisticated countermeasures. However, during the initial setup of your office systems, as per Mr. Kwame Mensah's instructions, I installed a deep-level tracer. We have successfully bypassed their firewalls and found the originating IP address." He clicked a button on his laptop. A digital map of the Republic of Songhai popped up on the large screen, a red, blinking insistently. Location: a small, disreputable bar in the port city of Badagry. Registered owner of the internet connection: Safia Adewale Mensah. Gasps of shock and outrage echoed through the boardroom. Kwame's face tightened, his eyes hardening into chips of granite. "Safia," he breathed, the name a curse on his lips. Django closed his eyes for a brief moment, a wave of pain washing over him. His own stepmother, his benefactor's wife, the woman who had once lived in such splendor, was behind this vicious, cowardly attack. Later that turbulent night, back at the besieged manor, Django sat alone in the vast, moonlit garden. The myriad lights of the magnificent house shimmered like distant stars behind him, but he felt an inner coldness that the warm night air could not dispel. Kwame approached him quietly, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "You handled that difficult situation in the boardroom like a true leader." "Django," he said, his voice filled with quiet approval. "I am weary, father," Django whispered, using the filial term naturally for the first time, the weight of the day pressing down on him. "I know you are, my son. But remember this. Real leaders do not rise to prominence on the fickle waves of applause and adulation. They are forged, tempered, and proven in the crucible of fire." Django nodded slowly, absorbing the wisdom. "Then let the fire continue to burn, if it must. I will not yield." Meanwhile, across town, in her squalid guest-house room, Safia received an unexpected call on her cheap, untraceable burner phone. "Hello," she answered, her voice wary. Kwame's voice, cold, clear, and utterly devoid of emotion, cut through the line. "You failed, Safia." She froze, her blood turning to ice. "I warned you once, when you underestimated my resolve," he continued, his tone implacable. "Now it is well and truly over. Legally, socially, publicly, you, Aisha, and Chinidu no longer exist in our narrative, in our lives." Click. The line went dead. Safia stared blankly at the silent phone. And for the very first time in her manipulative, scheming life, no cunning plan, no desperate countermove came to her mind. Just a vast, empty, terrifying fear. The day of the highly anticipated press conference arrived. The Mensa Holdings Grand Assembly Hall was packed to capacity with journalists from every major media house, anxious investors, curious employees, and members of the public. Everyone was waiting with bated breath to hear whether Django Mensa, the embattled young CEO, would step down in disgrace or fight back against the damning allegations. Cameras flashed incessantly, creating a blinding strobing effect. Social media platforms streamed the event live to millions across the nation and beyond, with trending captions like, "Scandal-ridden CEO Django Mensa to address the nation, resignation or rebuttal?" Django walked onto the brightly lit stage alone, dressed in a simple, dignified black kaftan. No expensive tie, no flashy designer shoes, just an aura of quiet strength and the undeniable truth shining in his eyes. He stood behind the imposing podium. The vast room fell into an expectant, pin-drop silence. He took a deep, steadying breath. "I was born," he began, his voice clear and resonant, "in a cramped, single room in a face-me-I-face-you compound, a shared yard dwelling, near the banks of the mighty Volta River. My beloved mother sold roasted groundnuts by the roadside to feed us. My father I never knew." He paused, allowing his words to sink in. "My very first job within the esteemed Mensa household, many years ago, was to clean shoes and run errands. To most, I was invisible, a part of the furniture. Sometimes, I was mocked for my humble origins. But I learned. I listened intently. And through it all, I remained loyal to the man who, unknowingly then, would change my life." The crowd, captivated, leaned in, listening intently. So, when these vicious lies and fabricated stories began to spread about me, defamatory emails I never wrote, offensive words I never uttered, bribes I never took, I was saddened, but I was not entirely surprised. I've been lied about, underestimated, and dismissed before. What did surprise me, what wounded me deeply, was discovering who was orchestrating this malicious campaign. He turned and nodded discreetly at a staff member positioned near the control booth. The massive screen behind him lit up. A comprehensive, meticulously compiled investigative video began to play, tracing the forged documents, the manipulated videos, and the slanderous blog posts directly to Safia's recently acquired establishment in Bedtime. It showed covert surveillance footage of Zola, the hacker, accepting a large envelope of cash from a disguised but identifiable figure. Most damningly, it showed the real, unedited footage of Django's original speech, revealing his true words of unity and reform. Audible gasps and murmurs of disbelief swept through the room. "And now," Django said, his voice strong and unwavering, filled with a righteous conviction, "let the unadulterated truth speak louder than the orchestrated noise of deceit." As if on cue, another screen adjacent to the first flickered to life, playing a pre-recorded video clip of Kwame Mensa, filmed just hours before. "I built this empire with my own 2 hands, with sweat, sacrifice, and unwavering determination," Kwame said, his voice filled with a profound, weary authority. "But in my darkest hour, my own family, those I trusted most, betrayed me for material gain. Only one person, one young man, stood steadfastly beside me, not for money, not for power, but for simple, unadulterated love and loyalty. Today, I publicly name him my son, not just in my will, but in my heart and in my blood. He is not a mistake of my past. He is, and always will be, my most cherished legacy." The screen faded to black. For a moment, there was stunned silence. Then, the room erupted in a deafening, spontaneous wave of applause. Some people in the audience cried openly. Journalists jumped to their feet, clamoring for attention. Tweets and social media posts flooded the internet. Hashtag Django cleared. Hashtag truth wins. Hashtag from shoe cleaner to global so. Hashtag the nation's new hero. Hashtag Kwame Mensa admits secret son. Hashtag real legacy hands empire to Django. Outside the assembly hall, massive crowds had gathered, inspired by the live broadcast. They were cheering wildly, dancing in the streets, and joyfully shouting his name in unison. "Django! Django! Django. Later that evening, as a sense of calm finally descended, Django stood on the expansive balcony of the Kumasi Grand Manor. Below him, the million lights of the sprawling city glowed like a carpet of scattered diamonds, the city he had once walked through barefoot, invisible and ignored. Kwame joined him, a rare, proud smile gracing his usually stoic face. "You did today what I, in all my years, could not fully accomplish," Kwame said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "You earned it all, the respect, the power, the admiration, without losing a single shred of your integrity, without compromising your soul." Django turned slowly, his expression thoughtful. "But father, I still lost people in this battle. Your wife, Safia. Your children, Aisha and Chinidu, they will surely despise me forever." Kwame nodded, his smile fading into a more somber expression. "Then let them, Django. Some crowns, the heaviest and most meaningful ones, are inevitably built from the ashes of loss and the pain of betrayal." A comfortable silence fell between them, filled only by the gentle whisper of the night breeze. Will they ever return, father? Will there ever be reconciliation?" Django asked, his voice tinged with a lingering sadness. Kwame's voice, when he replied, was firm, wise, and resolute. "The ones who are truly meant for your journey, Django, the ones whose hearts are pure, will always find their way back to you, no matter the obstacles. The rest, those consumed by bitterness and greed, are merely closed chapters in a book you have already finished reading." The wind blew softly, carrying the distant sounds of the awakening city. In a small, forgotten, and squalid guesthouse room across town, Safia, now truly alone, watched the tumultuous press conference unfold on a cheap, cracked smartphone, its screen flickering intermittently. She sat on the edge of a stained, lumpy mattress, isolated, forgotten, utterly powerless. As the final applause for Django thundered from the phone's tiny speaker, she threw the device violently across the room, where it shattered against the wall. "Then," she screamed, a raw, primal sound of rage and despair, into the empty, indifferent night. But no one answered. No one heard. No one cared. Back at the magnificent Kumasi Grand Manor, under a canopy of brilliant, distant stars, Django Mensa stood tall, no longer the hesitant boy, but a leader forged in fire. The poor, invisible shoe cleaner boy they had once insulted and dismissed was now the respected, powerful magnate they could not easily reach, a testament to resilience, integrity, and the unpredictable, often just, hand of fate.